Next, we have Lisa Ventura, founder at Cybersecurity Unity, who's going to talk about the importance of collaboration in cloud security. Lisa will be staying with us after her keynote for a brief Q&A, so please do submit any questions you have for her in the Swapcard chat. Over to you, Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about fostering greater collaboration in cloud security. So just a little bit about myself. As Penny said, I'm the founder of Cybersecurity Unity, and it's a global community organization which I've set up to help unite the industry and try to go some small way to combating the growing cyber threat through greater collaboration. So I'll start off with some of the myths that seem to come up a lot when it comes to cloud security. And the first one is that all clouds have the same security. And this is a really common misconception about the cloud. They don't often have the same security, and even two cloud environments that are managed by the same provider might have very different security measures in place, depending on what add-ons have been contracted for each cloud environment. Second myth that often comes up is that cloud is less secure than on-premise infrastructure. And this particular myth came up in Gartner's top 10 cloud myths list. And as noted in that, it's mostly a matter of perception. And to date, there have been very few security breaches in the public cloud. Most breaches that occur tend to continue to involve on-premise infrastructure environments, but any infrastructure is only as secure as the measures taken to protect it. So cloud security providers can invest much more easily in stronger security because it relates to their core business. A third myth that often comes up is that single tenant private clouds are always more secure than multi-tenant public clouds. And while this is an argument that sounds quite logical at first, because cloud environments with one dedicated tenant organization using them often appear to be much more secure than those that have multiple organizations attached to them, this isn't necessarily true. A lot of multi-tenant systems often provide an additional layer of content protection. So like tenants in an apartment building who use one key to enter it and another to exit it, multi-tenant systems really require both perimeter and apartment level security. And that makes them harder for hackers to breach your systems from the outside. So those are some of the common myths. And what about the most common cloud security threats? Well, the first one is misconfiguration cloud services. So one of the biggest threats is simply often due to the human factor. So it can often be completely preventable. And a cloud misconfiguration often happens when a user or admin will fail to properly set a cloud platform security setting. So, for example, an admin could accidentally allow unrestricted outbound access, and that might cause unprivileged applications and servers to communicate with each other. Another common threat is data loss. So cloud vendors will often have collaboration and shareability as benefits, but sometimes those environments will make it too easy for users to share data, either with internal employees or third parties. Plus, when companies move their data to cloud storage, they often struggle to perform regular backups because backing up such a large amount of data can often be costly and often difficult. And these factors will make data loss a real threat to many companies that run systems in the cloud. Recovering lost data will often take a lot of time, energy, and money resources, and sometimes those efforts can be futile. But those that often require your company to recreate that data or convert it from hard to copy formats will completely disrupt workflow. Plus, without performing regular backups, companies will often be exposed to an increased risk of ransomware. Another potential vulnerability with cloud applications is API vulnerabilities. So cloud applications will often typically interact with each other via APIs, and it's tempting to put all of your faith and trust in them. But unfortunately, organizations haven't historically been successful at securing them. A recent one with Nissan, for example, where an API flaw resulted in the ability for hackers to remotely control some features of the Nissan Leaf system. And when developers create APIs with inadequate authentication, they can contain security vulnerabilities that will allow anyone to access corporate data. Another thing that can come about is insufficient identity and access management controls. So, cloud storage providers can often encourage companies, and especially smaller ones, to move all their data to the cloud, promising lower costs and free service plans. And some companies will move data hastily without thinking through access and identity policies. So, having secure, insufficient identity and access management policies can introduce a number of threats. And one example of this can be password spraying, which is a variant of a brute force attack method, which is when a perpetrator will attempt to gain unauthorized access by spraying the same password across multiple accounts. And this can also circumvent common countermeasures like a lockout after multiple failed attempts. And this is by using the same password across multiple accounts before trying a different one. So, what are some of the recent high profile cloud security attacks? Well, there's been the Medibank breach, which has been one of Australia's largest health insurers. They suffered a massive data breach that affected more than 9 million of their customers. And the hackers breached the company's cloud based data network and made off with a huge trove of their customer information. After the company refused to pay a ransom, the intruders published a portion of the stolen data on the dark web, and this information included names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, Medicare numbers, passport numbers, and some health claims data. Another one was Marriott International, where more than 500,000 of their guests had sensitive personal information exposed after an attack that took place in September 2018. And following a forensics investigation, the company found that the Starwood network had been compromised sometime in 2014 before Starwood's acquisition by Marriott. Marriott had continued to use the IT infrastructure that it had in place from Starwood, and the consequence of using some outdated technologies most likely resulted in the breach. And while the attack didn't put the company out of business, it did do a lot of damage to its reputation. And another one was Accenture, which was hit by hackers connected to the Lockbit ransomware group in August 2021. The group stole and leaked proprietary corporate data, and even worse, it breached the company's customer systems. The hackers claimed to have stolen 6 terabytes of data and demanded a 50 million ransom. But Accenture told one publication that all affected systems were fully restored from backups with no impact on their operations or client systems. Another one is Facebook and LinkedIn, which were both breached some time before August 2019, but decided not to notify over 50 million of their users that personal data had been stolen, and shortly after that posted to a public database until April of 2021. The data included phone numbers, full names, locations, some email addresses, and other data from user profiles. And while Facebook later published an account of the attack on its blog, the damage to the company's reputation was tainted. Although it did say it found and fixed issues immediately, the ripple effect was hard to contain. And similarly, in 2021, LinkedIn also fell victim to a data scraping breach, which affected over 700 million LinkedIn profiles. Another one was a data breach by Magatoon, in which data belonging to 23 million users of the online comic book provider was exposed to a breach after a threat actor stole data from unsecured Elasticsearch databases. The breach exposed names, email addresses, genders, social media account identities, authentication tokens, and salted MD5 password hashes. So data breaches are still happening, and they are getting a lot more difficult to contain. So, thanks to the Russia-Ukraine war that broke out a year ago, cloud security has come to the forefront like never before. And recent research undertaken by ESET has shown that there's no decline at all in the levels of activities conducted by advanced persistent threat groups in places like Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea. The aerospace and defense industries continue to be of high interest to career-aligned groups, along with cryptocurrency and financial firms and exchanges. And in the Middle East, organizations in or linked to the diamond industry were targeted by an organization which is believed to be a supply chain attack that abused an Israel-based software suite used in these verticals. And on the other side of the globe, several campaigns were identified by Mirrorface, a China-aligned group, with one possibly targeting the House of Councillors elections in Japan. So all of this highlights just how many cloud and cyber threats there still are today, and these show no sign of abating anytime soon. So in the UK alone, there are a myriad of different organisations that are all working really hard to protect organisations against cloud and cyber attacks. And these include organisations like the National Cybersecurity Centre, the UK Cybersecurity Council, UKC3, the National Cyber Resilience Centre Group, DCMS, Action Fraud, Tech UK, and the regional organised crime units across the UK, just to name but a few. And on a global basis as well, there were organisations such as the Global Cyber Alliance, the Cloud Security Forum, the World Economic Forum Centre for Cybersecurity, and Cyberpeace, to name but a few. Now, some of these organisations will stick to specific swim lanes in what they do. So, for example, the UK Cybersecurity Council is tasked with creating a standards and ethics framework in cloud and cybersecurity, and with mapping out careers and skills within the industry, while the National Cybersecurity Centre is much more focused on the technical aspects of cloud and cybersecurity. But how do you know which organisation to go to when there are so many and with so much duplicated effort? So today, on a global scale, government e-services, remote work, digital currency, and e-learning, the momentum of digitisation, only hastened by a global public health crisis, has accelerated the extent to which we experience life online today. And while digital technology enables people to connect at an unprecedented scale and speed without the concern for any proximity, it's also allowed malicious actors to do the same, and especially so in the cloud. So, sharing innovations, skills, and tools, cyber threat actors present a growing concern to globally as attacks in the cloud become more frequent and complex. And cyber risks are now part of the broader country risk outlook, similarly to how we might look at, say, terrorism, interstate war, and other security risks. Cloud and cyber risks are now part of our approach to understanding the broader country risk element. So today, cloud and cybersecurity is truly borderless. So how can we ensure greater collaboration on a global scale to help combat the growing cloud and cyber threat? Well, it would seem in this new world of cyber attacks, taking advantage of the global network of resources to implement their attacks, global cloud and cybersecurity cooperation and collaboration is what's needed to provide visibility into cloud attacks and slow these attackers down. And as a starting point, if local, state, and global governments can share critical information collaboratively among their entities and with the private sector, this can provide actionable intelligence on current and future attacks in the cloud. And as a result, cloud security professionals have been asking themselves a fundamental question: how can we ensure greater collaboration on a global scale to help combat the growing cyber threat? So first, let's take a look at some of the barriers to greater collaboration in cloud and cybersecurity, because there does continue to be significant challenges around this. So one of the first things is the absence of common language, terminologies, and process for sharing. So many organizations will often use very disparate sets of languages, technologies, and processes that often makes collaboration ineffective. Most cloud and cybersecurity intelligence is handled via traditional data sharing, such as emails, PDFs, and antiquated manual processes that cannot support the speed at which attacks today penetrate and affect organizations. Another barrier is fears and concerns over sharing. Enterprises, organizations, and governments will often struggle over the extent of attack information that they can reveal. And concerns will often range from whether the information shared is revealing too much to their competitors and nation states, if it violates user privacy, or can be used by regulators against them. And this trust issue is further compounded when government agencies are brought into the mix. In particular, government agencies such as the FBI that have a long established history of a closed secret culture. So the challenge is how to develop a strong trust framework that can specify who the information should be shared with and how much to share. Another challenge is a lack of resources and motivation to share. So many organizations also often don't believe in the benefits of sharing details of a cloud security attack or a data breach. There are often no incentives or fiduciary responsibility for organizations to disclose such a breach unless it impacts a particular compliance requirement. There are more negative implications of sharing the details of a breach, such as lost customers, lawsuits, and privacy implications. And in addition, there is the dilemma that once information about a breach is shared, customers that are impacted must be notified promptly. And in the UK, we also have to notify the ICO as well in the event of a breach. So the notification of breaches must be done in an expedient manner that requires significant resources that may not be available in smaller organizations. So what is the role of governments in fostering greater collaboration in cloud and cybersecurity? Because it has to start somewhere, and governments need to play a major role in facilitating alignment, and industry associations as well that operate in and fully appreciate the increasingly dangerous cloud security threat landscape must take the initiative for real progress to begin. And with cloud and cybersecurity being truly borderless, the attacks we're seeing today have a very big global impact. And despite this, countries are largely still operating in silos when it comes to cloud and cybersecurity, favoring a nationalistic approach. And as of yet, although there have been some small discussions and events going on, there hasn't been a significantly huge global event that's been focused specifically on cloud amongst a lot of the world major leaders. And for example, we haven't seen 193 nations of the UN, the G7 or the G20 get up with industry experts to have a discussion on what can be done at a truly global level. And there should be a very big call to action to look at addressing this. And I believe that the industry should act now and start to communicate globally to foster that greater collaboration. And it requires the leadership of insights from organizations such as the Global Security Alliance and the National Cybersecurity Centre to try to bring governments and other similar organizations together on a global scale. And government machinery is often traditionally slow and left to its own devices. It cannot keep up with fast-moving and agile cyber threat actors. And additionally, most decision makers do not have the technical knowledge required to enact the proper steps in this space. And unless they start to have collaborative discussions with industry organizations who've got very deep networks with a multidisciplinary approach, they won't be able to address challenges at a pace of change that's required. So a critical aspect of this approach for the industry is to provide strong education on just how serious a problem cloud and cyber threats are and the potentially catastrophic impact that they could have. And as a starting point, all organizations as well as government need to start treating cloud and cyber threats and cybercrime almost in a way as acts of terrorism. And once that's been achieved, then governments will be able to start working a lot more closely with organizations globally. Once governments are working a lot more closely with industry and treating cyber threats with the seriousness they deserve, the necessary global infrastructure can then be developed to foster that greater collaboration. So, for example, this could be by developing an international communication system, enabling intelligence to be rapidly passed between governments and organizations in the same way that there are tsunami and terror warnings. And with so little communication occurring where there's intelligence known about existing and new cloud cyber threats, communication around potential threats that have occurred and letting the rest of the world know in a much quicker way is absolutely key. The cloud and cyber industry must be at the forefront of such an approach and start to communicate and pass intelligence between organizations globally. So collaboration with governments and associations, councils, and other key stakeholders in the cloud and cybersecurity industry can also reduce the time between the discovery of new threats and protection implementation, which in turn allows organizations to keep up with the ever-evolving threat landscape. And speeding up the delivery of threat intelligence is crucial for developing a strong cloud and cybersecurity program. And vendors should also work on making it as easy as possible to break down silos between different security disciplines. So various associations, councils, and other groups within cyber have been founded globally, but they tend to work alone and have very much a keep out mentality towards any perceived outsiders. And usually this is because of a competitive threat, and sometimes it's entirely justified for organizations to keep their distance from others. But if these important bodies join forces and work together to help combating the growing cloud and cyber threat, this might go some very small way towards achieving it. And if they all get together and work in a more collaborative way, this will help to establish a more sound, successful, and strategic framework for cloud and cybersecurity. So by making a conscious effort to improve information sharing globally, as well as through government and law enforcement agencies, the world will benefit from intelligence and insights that will help strengthen defenses against cloud and cybersecurity. And that, I think, can only be a really good thing. Cloud and cybersecurity is not a competition. There's room for everyone, and we all want to do the same thing, which is to protect our organizations from the growing threats. And I really do believe that collaboration is a big, big part of that. I can circulate the slides that I've shared after the day if anybody wants them. So I've put some further reading and resources there. And I'm more than happy to take any questions about this, and also for you to get in touch with me with any other questions that you have after the event today. So thank you very much for listening, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation. I do have some questions for you, which I am just getting up now. So, first question from our audience. So, instead of absolute security, should we not be looking at the absolute risk? Cloud may be more secure because they have a bigger security budget, economies of scale, etc. But I think, I think the questioner sort of wants to understand if as cloud, does it represent a bigger, more valuable target, and subsequently, does that increase risk?
Certainly some of the breaches we've seen that have been aimed at organizations that store their data in the cloud have happened today. And I think that risk should be a big part of it as well. And I think the collaboration point is looking at the big picture, the whole sort of essence around risk and preventing attacks and having those meaningful discussions. As I said earlier, I'm not seeing a lot of that go on with all the different bodies and entities within the UK. They tend to work very, very much in silos. And I think if we could all get together and have representatives from all those different organizations that all want to do the same thing and all want to look at securing the cloud and combating the growing cyber threat as best as they can, then those discussions and that communication and collaboration is absolutely key. And risk is very much a big part of that as well, and reducing that risk.
That's great, thank you. Another one, how do we encourage security firms to work together on a day-to-day basis? We've seen providers collaborate occasionally on, on major threats, such as WannaCry, but too often they're siloed. What are your thoughts there?
That's exactly it. And that's why Cyber Security Unity, I'm looking at getting set up to collaborate, to get everyone together, to have some of those discussions. And I think as well, as I mentioned earlier, a lot see getting together with other organizations as competition. And I think we need to get over that barrier and sort of say, no, there's room for everybody, as I said in my presentation, and really giving them the strong benefits of that collaboration, of getting together, having those meaningful discussions. What are the key threats? What are the key challenges? How can we as an industry work together to try to help combat some of them? Never going to solve everything. Hackers are changing. The new things come out by the minute, let alone anything else. But it might be that there are 2 or 3 really key things that if organizations could get over the competitiveness and the siloed working and really collaborate together, I think we could stand a good chance of combating at least some of them.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Another one for you. Is the absence of common language, process and terminology symptomatic of the fact that a lot of this is about the underlying company is a private enterprise? Is the lack of collaboration because of that need for reputation management and the benefits of proprietary standards to each particular enterprise?
Absolutely. So I think there needs to be a commonality in all areas of cloud security. And again, if organizations could collaborate more effectively, then perhaps we could come up with that, that common language, get over some of those barriers, and look towards those things that could really help in terms of what the new threats are and what we can do as an industry to help combat them. So I think it's starting sort of small at the moment because traditionally it has been so solid. And there are some really great organizations doing fantastic work. As I mentioned, the council, they're working on a very specific piece around standards and ethics in cybersecurity, which is something that's really missing. And I think if all those organizations could get together and collaborate a lot more effectively, there could be with the ways of doing things. Somebody might say, have we not thought of this, or could we try that angle, or so on. But if we continue to work in silos, it's never gonna evolve or move forward.
Yeah. What can smaller and mid-sized organisations do to really have their voice in terms of security collaboration? How can they sort of amplify their own input?
Absolutely. So the National Cyber Resilience Centres, there are lots of them dotted around the UK. If you're a small or medium business, get involved with and get in touch with your local cyber resilience centres. And I'm happy to share the details of these, because another area is many organisations often are just looking at the big enterprises and the larger organisations. The cyber resilience centres, of which I'm a part of one on the advisory group in the West Midlands, have the small businesses and SMEs at their heart, and they provide training for cloud and cyber. They provide a lot of help and resources for cyber hygiene and practical things that they can do. But another thing I do see is that small businesses and SMEs traditionally tend to have their head in the sand a little bit. It's very much a sort of, well, we're too small to be attacked, so we don't need to bother with a lot of this until something does happen and they're breached, and then by which time it's too late. So I would definitely strongly recommend getting in touch with the cyber resilience centres and getting involved in their networks, because they can be great in terms of that advice and being able to have the voices of small businesses and SMEs amplified.
Okay, that's great. We're coming right to the end. I just want to quickly sneak one more in. You talked about the role of governments. Do you think that the UK government is doing enough to, I suppose, arm businesses and critical public sector organisations against the threat?
I think I see a lot of good work going on. I don't think it's publicised or made aware of enough. And I think there is a lot of work to be done around that awareness piece. So, for example, the remit for cybersecurity is now within a new government department. It's with the Department for Science, Technology and Innovation.
Yes.
It was under the Department for Media, Culture and Sport previously, and that's been a very, very recent change. So again, I think there's a lot more that can be done to promote the work that government is doing. I think, like any government, there could be a lot more that they could do. But I think that amplification of the awareness of what they are doing and how you can get involved. For example, there are a lot of surveys and things come out and consultations. A lot more work needs to be done to raise awareness of those, so all businesses can respond to those consultations and have their voice heard.
Great. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Lisa, for that great presentation and for taking our audience questions.